So, here we are, and this is the last reading from the Red Book. So if you ever go to a Jungian analyst, the first question you should ask them is, have you read the Red Book? If they say no, put your coat back on and leave, because they're not a true Jungian. And so in my case, you have no doubt, because after the next 10 pages, I will have read the entire Red Book on video for all the world to see. So I urge you to take a look at all the sections of the Red Book, maybe more than once. There's lots of wisdom here. Okay, so this is part 7 of the, thank you, Miles. Save the congratulations for the end of the reading. So this is part 7 of the Red Book of, it's the essay called The Magician, and it's the last part of Liber Secundus. There's a secondary, or another part of the Red Book called the Scrutinies, and that contains the 7 sermons to the dead. And I read those about 2 years ago, and they have their own playlist, although I think that I also put them in the Red Book playlist. So anyway, I'm going to straighten all that out. And just so you know my plans here, I'm going to read in the next 2 weeks, I hope, I'm going to read the Bible and the Psyche, individuation symbolism in the Old Testament. And I think this is a very important book by Dr. Edward Edinger. I'm going to read it cover to cover, so that anyway, you'll have it. And so to complete my reading of the Red Book, here we go. And this is page, let's see. This is page 448 to page 458. And I'm reading from the Reader's Edition, the Red Book by C.G. Jung. The beginning of all things is love, but I'm going to start that again. The beginning of all things is love, but the being of things is life. This distinction is terrible. Why, O spirit of the darkest depths, do you force me to say that whoever loves does not live, and whoever lives does not love? I always get it backward. Should everything be turned into its opposite? Will there be a sea where Philemon's temple stands? Will his shady island sink into the deepest ground, into the whirlpool of the withdrawing flood that earlier swallowed all people and lands? Will the bottom of the sea be where Ararat rises? What repulsive words do you mutter, you mute son of the earth? You want to sever my soul's embrace. You, my son, do you thrust yourself between? Who are you, and who gives you the power? Everything that I strove for, everything I wrested from myself, do you want to reverse it again and destroy it? You are the son of the devil, to whom everything holy is inimical. You grow overpowering. You frighten me. Let me be happy in the embrace of my soul, and do not disturb the peace. Let me be happy in the embrace of my soul, and do not disturb me. And do not disturb the peace of the temple. Off with you, you pierce me with paralyzing force, for I do not want your way. Should I languidly fall at your feet? You devil and son of the devil, speak. Your silence is unbearable and of awful stupidity. I won my soul, and to what did she give birth for me? You monster. You, I have to read that again, sorry. I won my soul, and to what did she give birth for me? You, monster, a son. Ha! A frightful miscreant, a stammerer, a newt's brain, a primordial lizard. You want to be king of the earth? You want to banish proud free men, bewitch beautiful women, break up castles, rip open the belly of old cathedrals? Dumb thing, a lazy bug-eyed frog that wears pondweed on his skull's pate. And you want to call yourself my son? You're no son of mine, but the spawn of the devil. The father of the devil entered into the womb of my soul, and in you has become flesh. I recognize you, Philemon, you most cunning of fraudsters. You have deceived me. You impregnated my maidenly soul with the terrible worm, Philemon. Philemon, damned charlatan, you abed the mysteries for me. I'm sorry, that's wrong. Philemon, damned charlatan, you aped the mysteries for me. You laid the mantle of the stars on me. You played a Christ fool's comedy with me. You hanged me, carefully and ludicrously, in the tree just like Odin. You let me devise runes to enchant Salome, and meanwhile you procreated my soul with the worm. Spew of the dust, deception upon deception, terrible devil, trickery. You gave me the force of magic, you crowned me, you clad me with the shimmer of power that let me play a would-be Joseph, father to your son. You lodged a puny basilisk in the nest of the dove. My soul, you adulterous horror, you became pregnant with this bastard. I am dishonored. Laughable father of the Antichrist, how I mistrusted you, and how poor was my mistrust, that it could not gouge the magnitude of this infamous act. What do you break apart? You broke love and life in twain. From this ghastly sundering, the frog and the son of the frog come forth, ridiculous, disgusting sight, irresistible advent. They will sit on the banks of the sweet water and listen to the nocturnal song of the frogs, since their God has been born as the son of frogs. Where is Salome? Where is the unreasonable question of love? No more questions. My gaze turned to the coming things, and Salome is where I am. The woman follows your strongest, not you. Thus she bears you, your children, in both a good and a bad way. As I stood so alone on the earth, which was covered by rain clouds and falling night, my serpent crept up to me and told me a story. Once upon a time, there was a king, and he had no children, but he would have liked to have a son. So he went to a wise woman who lived as a witch in the forest and confessed all his sins as if she were a priest appointed by God. In this she said, "Dear king, you have done what you should not have done. But since it has come to pass, it has come to pass, and we will have to see how you can do it better in the future. Take a pound of otter lard, bury it in the earth, and let 9 months pass. Then dig up that place again and see what you find." So the king went to his house, ashamed and saddened, because he had humiliated himself before the witch in the forest. Yet he listened to her advice, dug a hole in the garden at night, and placed a pot of otter lard in it, which he had obtained with some difficulty. Then he let 9 months go by. After this time had passed, he went again by night to the place where the pot lay buried and dug it up. To his great astonishment, he found a sleeping infant in the pot, though the lard had disappeared. He took out the infant and jubilantly brought it to his wife. She took it immediately to her breast, and behold, her milk flowed freely. And so the child thrived and became great and strong. He grew into a man who was greater and stronger than all others. When the king's son was 20 years old, he came before his father and said, I know that you have produced me through sorcery, and that I was not born as one of men. You have made me from the repentance of your sins, and this has made me strong. I am born from no woman, which makes me clever. I am strong and clever, and therefore I demand the crown of the realm from you. The old king was startled at his son's knowledge, but even more by his impetuous longing for regal power. He remained silent and thought, what has produced you? Otter lard? Who bore you? The womb of the earth? I drew you from a pot. A witch humiliated me. And he decided to let his son be killed secretly. But because his son was stronger than others, he feared him, and therefore he wanted to take refuge in a trick. He went again to the sorceress in the forest and asked her for advice. She said, Dear king, you confess no sin to me this time because you want to commit a sin. I advise you to bury another pot with otter's lard and leave it to lie in the earth for 9 more months. Then dig out again and see what has happened. The king did what the sorceress advised him, and thenceforth his son became weaker and weaker. And when the king returned to the place where the pot had laid after 9 months, he could dig his son's grave at the same time. He lay the dead one in the fosse beside the empty pot. But the king was saddened, and when he could no longer master his melancholy, he returned yet again to the sorceress one night and asked her for advice. She spoke to him. Dear king, you wanted a son, but the son wanted to be king himself and also had the power and cleverness for it. And then you wanted your son no more. Because of this, you lost your son. Why are you complaining? You have everything, dear king, that you wanted. But the king said, you are right. I wanted it so, but I did not want this melancholy. Do you have any remedies against remorse? The sorceress spoke, Dear king, go to your son's grave, fill the pot again with otter's lard, and after 9 months, see what you find in the pot. The king did this, and as he had been commanded, and henceforth he became happy and did not know why. When the 9 months had passed, he dug out the pot again, and the body had disappeared, but in the pot there lay a sleeping infant, and he realized that the infant was his dead son. He took the infant to himself, and henceforth he grew as much in a week as other infants grow in a year. And when 20 weeks had passed, the son came before the father again and claimed his realm. But the father had learned from experience and already knew for a long time how everything would turn out. After the son had voiced his demand, the old king got up from his throne and embraced his son with tears of joy and crowned him king. And so the son, who had thus become king, was grateful to his father and held him in high esteem as long as his father was granted life. But I spoke to my serpent. In truth, my serpent, I didn't know that you are also a teller of fairy tales. So tell me, how should I interpret your fairy tale? Serpent, imagine you are the old king and have a son. Who is the son? Serpent, Well, I thought that you had just spoken of a son who doesn't make you very happy. I, what? You don't mean that I should crown him? Serpent, yes, who else? I, that's uncanny. What about, but what about the sorceress? Serpent, the sorceress is a motherly woman whose son you should be, since you are a child renewing himself in you. I, oh no, will it be impossible for me to be a man? Serpent, sufficient manhood and beyond that, fullness of childhood, which is why you need the mother. I'm ashamed to be a child. Serpent, and thus you kill your son. A creator needs the mother, since you are not a woman. I, this is a terrible truth. I thought and hoped that I could be a man in every way. Serpent, you cannot do this for the sake of the son. To create means mother and child. I, the thought that I must remain a child is unbearable. Serpent, for the sake of your son, you must be a child and leave him the crown. I, the thought that I must remain a child is humiliating and shattering. Serpent, a salutary antidote against power. Don't resist being a child, otherwise you resist your son, whom you want above all. It's true, I want the son and survival, but the price of this is high. Serpent, the sun stands higher. You are smaller and weaker than the sun. That is the bitter truth, but it can't be avoided. Don't be defiant. Children must be well behaved. I, damn scorn. Serpent, man of mockery, I'll have patience with you. My wells should flow for you and pour forth the drink of salvation. If all lands parch with thirst and everyone comes to you, begging for the water of life, so subject yourself to the sun. Where am I going to take hold of the immeasurable? My knowledge and ability are poor. My power is not enough. At which the serpent curled up, gathered herself into knots, and said, do not ask after the morrow. Sufficient unto you is the day. You need not worry about the means. Let everything grow. Let everything sprout. The sun grows out of himself. End quote. The myth commences. The one that need only be lived, not sung. The one that sings itself. Let me read that again. Getting a little bit of a hypnotic trance here. Montana says, Skip, I'm so grateful for what you do. Man, it has been incalculably useful to me. Not only the fantastic reading of Jung's work, but also your own commentaries have been great. Thank you for taking this monumental task on yourself. I appreciate that, Montana, very much. Yes, reading Liber Novus turned out to be quite a project because Jung is making us rethink so many things that were embedded into our psyche over 2,000 years that when you hear them, it's very hard to get your mind around them. And so you end up, also when you read them, they end up hypnotizing you. And so then you have to pull yourself out of that and think about what it means. Okay, and now I don't remember where I was reading, as a matter of fact. Okay, I'm going to go back to page 452. Probably won't hurt to reread this in case I am rereading it. I sort of lost my train of thought there. Okay. But I spoke to my serpent. In truth, my serpent, I didn't know that you were also a teller of fairy tales. So tell me, how should I interpret your fairy tale? Serpent, imagine you are the old king and have a son. I, who is the son? Serpent, well, I thought that you had just spoken of a son who doesn't make you very happy. I, what? You don't mean that I should crown him? Serpent, yes, who else? I, that's uncanny. But what about the sorceress? Serpent, the sorceress is a motherly woman whose son you should be, since you are a child renewing himself in you. I, oh no, will it be impossible for me to be a man? Serpent, sufficient manhood and beyond that fullness of childhood, which is why you need the mother. I'm ashamed to be a child. Serpent, and thus you kill your son. A creator needs the mother, since you are not a woman. This is a terrible truth. I thought and hoped that I could be a man in every way. Serpent, you cannot do this for the sake of the son. To create means mother and child. The thought that I must remain a child is unbearable. Serpent, for the sake of your son, you must be a child and leave him the crown. The thought that I must remain a child is humiliating and shattering. Serpent, a salutary antidote against power. Don't resist being a child, otherwise you resist your son, whom you want above all. It's true, I want the sun and survival, but the price of this is high. Serpent, the sun stands higher. You are smaller and weaker than the sun. That is a bitter truth, but it can't be avoided. Don't be defiant. Children must be well behaved. Damn scorn. Serpent, man of mockery, I'll have patience with you. My wells should flow for you and pour forth the drink of salvation. If all lands parch with thirst and everyone comes to you begging for the water of life, so subject yourself to the sun. Where am I going to take hold of the immeasurable? My knowledge and ability are poor. My power is not enough. At which point the serpent curled up, gathered herself into knots, and said, do not ask after the morrow. Sufficient unto you is the day. You need not worry about the means. Let everything grow. Let everything sprout. The sun grows out of himself. Okay, I did read that, I guess, a second time. This time I will continue on. The myth commences, the one that need only be lived, not sung, the one that sings itself. I subject myself to the sun, the one engendered by sorcery, the unnaturally born, the son of the frogs, who stands at the waterside and speaks with his fathers and listens to their nocturnal singing. Truly, he is full of mysteries and superior in strength to all men. No man has produced him, and no woman has given birth to him. The absurd has entered the age-old mother, and the son has grown in the deepest ground. He sprang up and was put to death. He rose again, was produced anew in the way of sorcery, and grew more swiftly than before. I gave him the crown that unites the separated, and so he unites the separated for me. I gave him the power, and thus he commands, since he is superior in strength and cleverness to all others. I did not give way to him willingly, but out of insight. No man binds above and below together, But he who did not grow like a man, and yet has the form of a man, is capable of binding them. My power is paralyzed, but I survive in my Son. I set aside my concern that he may master the people. I am solitary. The people rejoice at him. I was powerful, now I am powerless. I was strong, now I am weak. Since then, he has taken all the strength into himself. Everything has turned itself upside down for me. I love the beauty of the beautiful, the spirit of those rich in spirit, the strength of the strong. I laughed at the stupidity of the stupid. I despised the weakness of the weak, the meanness of the mean, and hated the badness of the bad. But now I must love the beauty of the ugly, the spirit of the foolish, and the strength of the weak. I must admire the stupidity of the clever, must respect the weakness of the strong and the meanness of the generous, and honor the goodness of the bad. Where does that leave mockery, contempt, and hatred? They went over to the Son as a token of power. His mockery is bloody, and how contemptuously his eyes flash. His hatred is a singing fire. Enviable one, you son of the gods, how can one fail to obey you? He broke me in two, he cut me up. He yokes the separated. Without him, I would fall apart, but my life went on with him. My love remained with him. Thus I entered the solitude with a black look on my face, full of resentment and outrage at my Son's dominion. How could my Son arrogate my power? I went into my gardens and sat down in a lonely spot on rocks by the water and brooded darkly. I called the serpent, my nocturnal companion, who lay with me on the rocks through many twilights, imparting her serpent wisdom. But then my Son emerged from the water, great and powerful, the crown on his head, with a swirling lion's mane, shimmering serpent skin covering his body. He said to me, I come to you and demand your life. What do you mean? Have you even become a god? I rise again. I had become flesh. Now I return to eternal glitter and shimmer, to the eternal embers of the sun, and leave you your earthliness. You will remain with men. You have been in immortal company long enough. Your work belongs to the earth. What a speech. Weren't you wallowing in the earth and the underneath? I have become man and beast, and now ascend again to my own country. Where is your country? In the light, in the egg, in the sun, in what is innermost and compressed, in the eternal longing embers, so rises the sun in your heart and streams out into the cold world. How you transfigure yourself. I want to vanish from your sight. You ought to live in darkest solitude. Men, not gods, should illuminate your darkness. How hard and solemn you are. I'd like to bathe your feet with my tears, dry them with my hair. I'm raving. Am I a woman? Also a woman, also a mother, pregnant, giving birth awaits you. O Holy Spirit, grant me a spark of your eternal light. You are with child. I feel the torment and the fear of the desolation of pregnant women. Do you go from me, my God? You have the child. My soul, do you still exist? You serpent, you frog, you magically produced boy, whom my hands buried, you ridiculed, despised, hated, one who appeared to me in a foolish form. Woe betide those who have seen their soul and felt it with hands. I am powerless in your hand, my God. He, the pregnant woman, belongs to fate. Release me, I rise to the eternal realm. Will I never hear your voice again? Oh, damn deception. What am I asking? You'll talk to me again tomorrow. You'll chat over and over in the mirror. He, do not rail. I will be present and not present. You will hear and not hear. I will be and not be. He, such is my language, and to you I leave the understanding. No one besides you has your God. Okay, let me read that again. I have it double starred here, so it's an important paragraph. No one besides you has your God. He is always with you, yet you see him in others, and thus he is never with you. You strive to draw to yourself those who seem to possess your God. You will come to see that they do not possess him, and that you alone have him. Thus you are alone among men, in the crowd and yet alone, solitude in multitude. Ponder this. I suppose I ought to remain silent after what you have said, but I cannot. My heart bleeds when I see you go from me. He, let me go. I shall return to you in renewed form. Do you see the sun, how it sinks red in the mountains? This day's work is accomplished, and a new sun returns. Why are you mourning the sun of today? Must night fall? He, is it not mother of the day? Because of night I want to despair. He, why lament? It is fate. Let me go. My wings grow, and the longing toward eternal light swells up powerfully in me. You can no longer stop me. Stop your tears and let me ascend with cries of joy. You are a man of the fields. Think of your crops. I become light like the bird that rises up into the skies of morning. Do not stop me. Do not complain. Already I hover. The cry of life escapes from me. I can no longer hold back my supreme pleasure. I must go up. It has happened. The last cord tears away. My wings bear me up. I dive up into the sea of light. You who are down there, you distant twilight being, you fade from me. Where have you gone? Something has happened. I am lamed. Has the God not left my sight? Where is the God? What has happened? How empty, how utterly empty. Should I proclaim to men how you vanished? Should I preach the gospel of forsaken solitude? Should we all go into the desert and strew ashes on our heads since the God has left us? I believe and accept that the God is something different from me. He swung high with jubilant joy. I remain in the night of pain, no longer with the God, but alone with myself. Now shut, you bronze doors. I open to the flood of devastation and murder brooding over the peoples, open so as to midwife the God. Shut, my mountains, bury you, and seas flow over you. I came to myself, a giddy, pitiful figure. My eye, I didn't want this fellow as my companion. I found myself with him. I prefer a bad woman or a wayward hound, but one's own eye, this horrifies me. An opus is needed that one can squander decades on and do it out of necessity. I must catch up with a piece of the Middle Ages within myself. We have only finished the Middle Ages of others. I must begin early, in that period when the hermits died out. Asceticism, inquisition, torture are close at hand and impose themselves. The barbarian requires barbaric means of education. My eye, you are a barbarian. I want to live with you, therefore I will carry you through an utterly medieval hell until you are capable of making living with you bearable. Until you are capable of making living with you bearable, you should be the vessel and the womb of life. Therefore I shall purify you. The touchstone is being alone with oneself. This is the way. Okay, so that is the end, fini. And I will now go back and read the footnotes. I'll just take a look at your chats quickly. Montana says, it took me a while to just accept what actually Jung is. The man is beyond what I can ever do, completely and adamant. Admittedly, he is not only paragonic, but beautiful as well. A contrast against him is, yeah. Okay, so here are the footnotes. The text reads, the beginning of all things is love, but the being of things is life. And the footnote reads, in Transformations and Symbols of the Libido, 1912, which is called Psychology of the Unconscious in English, while discussing his concept of libido, Jung referred to the cosmogonic significance of Eros in Hesiod's Theogony, which he linked with the figure of Phanes in Orphism and with Kama, the Hindu god of love. Paragraph 223. The text reads, should everything be turned into its opposite? And the footnote reads, in his later work, Jung gave importance to enantiodromia, the principle that everything turns into its opposite, which he attributed to Heraclitus. Psychological Types, 1921, collected work 6, paragraph 708 and following. Then the text reads, will the bottom of the sea be where Ararat rises? And the footnote reads, in the biblical account of the flood, the ark came to rest on Mount Ararat, Genesis 8:4. Ararat is a dormant volcano cone formerly in Armenia, now Turkey. And the text reads, Philemon, damned charlatan, you aped the mysteries from me. You laid the mantle of the stars on me. You played a Christ fool's comedy with me. You hanged me carefully and ludicrously in the tree, just like Odin. You let me devise runes to enchant Salome, and meanwhile you procreated my soul with the worm, spew of the dust. And the footnote reads, in Norse mythology, Odin was pierced by a spear and hung from the world tree, Yggdrasil, where he hung for 9 nights until he found the runes which gave him power. And then the text reads on page 450, as I stood so alone on the earth, which was covered by rain clouds and falling night, my serpent crept up to me and told me a story. And the footnote reads, on February 23rd, 1914, in Black Book 4, the dialogue is with the soul, and this section begins with Jung asking her what is stopping him from getting back to his work, and she tells him that it is his ambition. He thought he had overcome it, but she said that he had simply negated it, and thus tells him this tale as follows, page 171. On February 13th, 1914, Jung gave a talk on dream symbolism in the Zurich Psychoanalytic Society. From March 30th to April 13th, Jung vacationed in Italy. Okay, so this is February 23rd, 1914. And so remember that the active imaginations began on December 12th, 1913. So this is about 10 weeks, roughly 10 weeks of all of these active imaginations that have made up the Red Book. And on page 453, the text reads, a salutary antidote against power. And the footnote reads, Black Book 4 has ambition, page 180. Where's this other footnote? Okay, there's another footnote or another text. I can't find where it is, but the footnote reads, Black Book 4 has work instead of sun in the next few lines. So sun equals work in Dr. Jung's mind in the Black Book. So that's very interesting to know. If you go back through this and think of every time he mentions sun, it's his work. That's a very interesting fact. Okay, on page 455, the text reads, but then my son emerged from the water, great and powerful, the crown on his head, with a swirling lion's mane, shimmering serpent skin covering his body. And he said to me, and the footnote reads, April 19th, 1914, the preceding paragraph was added to the draft. And then the text reads, what do you mean? Have you even become a god? And the footnote reads, Black Book 5, this dialogue is with his soul. So the sun, in this case, where I was referring to he several times in the dialogue, that represents his soul. Okay, then I think I might have missed 2 pages here. Okay, I'm going to go back to 455 and I'm going to reread from there. It won't hurt for you to hear it again. I feel the torment and the fear and the desolation of pregnant woman. Do you go from me, my God? You have the child. Okay. And then this goes on. Well, I guess I did read it because I did underline it. Let me read it again. Doesn't hurt to hear it again. My soul, do you still exist? You serpent, you frog, you magically produced boy, whom my hands buried. You ridiculed, despised, hated one who appeared to me in a foolish form. Woe betide those who have seen their soul and felt it with hands. I am powerless in your hand, my God. The pregnant woman belongs to fate. Release me, I rise to the eternal realm. Will I never hear your voice again? Oh, damn deception. What am I asking? You'll talk to me again tomorrow. You'll chat over and over in the mirror. Do not rail, I will be present and not present. You will hear and not hear me. I will be and not be. I, you utter gruesome riddles. He, that is my language, and to you I leave the understanding. No one besides you has your God. He is always with you, yet you see him in others, and thus he is never with you. You strive to draw to yourself those who seem to possess your God. You will come to see that they do not possess him, and that you alone have him. Thus you alone among men, in the crowd and yet alone. Solitude and multitude, ponder this. Okay, I do remember reading that, so I'm not going to go on, but so the text reads on page 457, I believe and accept that the God is something different from me. And in the footnote reads, Black Book 5 has entered soul instead of God. And then a little later it says, no longer with the God, but alone with myself. And the footnote reads, Black Book 5 has instead with my soul. Okay, so alone with his soul instead of his God. And then shut may mountains bury you and seas flows over you. The footnote reads, this paragraph is added to the draft. Then the text reads, I came to myself, a giddy and pitiful figure. And the footnote reads, the corrected draft has instead to myself. Okay, so in other words, spelled M-Y-S-E-L-F. And in the text, it had read with a space between the my and the self. So it had said, I came to myself, a giddy and pitiful figure. But the corrected draft says, I came to myself. Okay, and then finally, an opus is needed that one can squander decades on and do it out of necessity. And the footnote reads, the remainder is added to the draft, pages 555 and following. And then going to the last page, we've only finished the Middle Ages. Of others, I must begin early in that period when the hermits died out. And the footnote reads, in 1930, Jung stated, a movement back into the Middle Ages is a sort of regression, but it is not personal. It is a historical regression, a regression into the past of the collective unconscious. This always takes place when the way ahead is not free, when there is an obstacle from which you recoil, or when you need to get something out of the past in order to climb over the wall ahead. Around this time, Jung began working intensively on medieval theology. The type problem in the history of the mind in antiquity and the Middle Ages, from chapter 1 of Psychological Types, Collected Work 6. And then the last words in Liber Secundus. This is the way. And the footnote reads, at this point, the handwritten draft has finis surrounded by a box, meaning the end. And so you see matter what it is for anybody else, it's quite numinous for me. Let's see. So, Jahan says, I still don't get what Jung was trying to say with the magician. He was trying to get at an aspect of himself. He saw it in many different ways. He ultimately realized that Philemon represented himself, and that the quote over the door of his house that he built with his bare hands in Bollingen says, I forget exactly, but something like, in honor of Philemon and Faust's penitence. And the point was that in Faust, the devil killed Philemon and Bacchus. And so he considered his life's work to be a penitence for what Faust did. And mind you, Faust is an oft-repeated story in many different ways, in which we sell our soul to the devil. I mean, even if you know me and know my story, you know that even I did that. And so the point is that it's all in you. And Philemon is actually yourself and your God image. And this is the penitence of Faust to recognize that this is part of you, and each one of us. And Miles says here, God needs human beings because, as far as we know, we're the only consciousness in the universe. So God needs human beings conscious of the wonder of his, her creation. Exactly. I guess you're quoting me, so I can't dispute that one. Whilst reading Jung's Ion, researches into the phenomenology of the self. Yeah, we did an entire series of 32 seminars on Ion. And so if you're interested, you should join our advanced reading group, and there you can have access to the playbacks of all those seminar sessions and understand what it's all about. Carl says, you alone possess him, yes, still looking for him in others. And stop looking for him. Yeah, you can't find, he's not in others, he's in each one of us. And Montana says, Skip, can you get your thoughts when you were reading that last sentence? Can we get your thoughts? I don't think I can give you an adequate explanation. Obviously, it's quite numinous to me. And because I've spent the last 33 years studying Dr. Jung's work, to have him say that at that point in the book just brings all these ideas that I've thought about for so many years together. in one gulp. And so being able to somehow put into words that experience for me is just not really possible. I mean, for me, it's a numinous experience, as you see my reaction from it. And if it's not for you, then um, maybe you need to keep doing some reading or go back through this and try to now follow along, because what he's basically saying in this last couple of pages is your son is you, or your daughter is you if you're a woman, perhaps, and um, and the and your son is your work, in another way, metaphorically, and and so you need to follow the way to the supreme meaning. And Dr. Jung realized that he had found God. Okay, and I can put it as simply as that. That you may have heard me say, sort of tongue in cheek, that Nietzsche declared God as dead because, for all rationalism, for all of the logos, God is dead. Um, because the scientists can't find God up there, can't find God down there. Where's God? Boop. Or at least we can suggest that that's where it is. I mean, a lot of what's in the psyche um, is not necessarily between your two ears, but it's hard to explain what that is. And gradually you'll have an epiphany about it. And when I had an epiphany when I saw Dr. Jung say, "I have no need to believe, I know." And when I heard him say that the first time, I don't remember when it was, maybe more than a decade ago, probably 15 years ago, um, I said, "Oh, I know too." And so then I had to spend a decade figuring out what it is I know. And so I sort of feel like I've experienced that. I certainly have experienced that in many different ways every day of my life lately. And, there's just too many synchronicities in my life not to be knowledgeable about it. And, we're taught in the Logos world, we're taught to ignore that. Okay. But the problem is that that's where your life is. Okay. That's where you live. Okay. Everything that you can see in this picture and everything that's around you in your room is a product of logos. We need logos 100%, because you can't make anything from a pen to the red book without logos. You have to have logic and rationality and ways to build things and make things and so on. So we have to have logos, but logos is not life. Okay, logos is something else. Um, it's the skeleton of life, perhaps. What you see behind me is a portion of the skeleton of my life, but you don't see any of it wiggling. And even me, my body that you physically see is a kind of a product of logos in the sense of the DNA being built up like a skeleton. But if you make a perfect being like Frankenstein that has everything that is physically in my body, how do you blow life into that? You know, this is kind of the story of Mary Shelley and Frankenstein, isn't it? And um, and so life is something else, and all of it is in the Eros side, all of it. Okay, and there's chaos. Okay, we were. Where's the book? Okay, now I let it get away from me. Okay, so there's a book called Sacred Chaos by Francoise O'Kane. And so everything that's not logos is chaos. And what's in that chaos is your life, all of your family, everything that you ever loved in the world. Everything is on the Eros side because none of this matters. Okay, if this was blown away, if I came home and found a fire here and everything was destroyed, I can get along without it. I don't need it. I can build it up again. It will all begin again, as Dr. Jung said. But your life is something different from that. I don't know. I hope that that's sort of a freebooting answer. Let's see what Gray has been saying. Okay, Montana asked how much does the advanced reading group cost? I asked for a donation of $10 a month, and that's only to help me defray the costs of maintaining it, because among other things, it costs me nearly $60 a month just to have the Zoom membership that allows for the webinar and so on. And so there are costs that are involved in what I do here. Obviously, I mean, you can't be on the internet without a few costs, and so I asked for $10 a month. But if you're somebody that can't afford $10 a month, then we'll have a discussion. There are many members of the advanced reading group that I don't ask for $10 from. So it's a honor system kind of. And Montana says, yeah, I brought it all into a head. That is amazing. Gray says, I'm not sure. I usually offer Skip super chats. Yes, that's true. Gray does that. So the donation can come via PayPal to skip.conover.com. It can be done by super chats by hitting the little $sign at the bottom when I'm live, on any time that I'm live. And it can be done via Patreon, which is how I started to do it. And so I have a number of followers on Patreon. And Gray says, Skip does this because he doesn't have a choice like all magicians. Yeah, that's right. And Gray does know. Definitely. Carl, own search for Philemon. It's not an easy mountain to climb, and often I slip back and am confused, but keep trying, and we move up the mountain. Well, Carl, you have to stop climbing mountains and look inside. Okay. But interestingly, I mean, the mountain is an important archetype. And I did read an anecdote in the last couple of days. I think it was offered by Miles and by our friend Craig Nelson, that there's this story that Adler told of a woman who was non-compos mentis. She was dying, and there was no stopping her death. And just before she died, she rallied for a moment and said, "I have seen the star over the mountain." And so that's what you reminded me of. It's a very moving story, actually. Montana says, yeah, rationalism thinks it has cornered the market on knowing, experiences something thrown away in this day and age. Yeah, and that's what needs to be recovered. Ray says, the logos is what speaks being into existence from nothingness, has to become flesh, though. Yeah, that's the point. And read the first 14 chapters of John, the book of John. A lot of theologians are stuck on John 1:1, but that's not where God is. The Bible is just a black book stop, just a black doorstop, unless you put life into it. And whether it's your pastor putting life into it or you putting life into it, otherwise it's just a black doorstop that sits on your shelf. And Montana says, I've been figuring out that the logos is mere skeleton as well, mostly through my beginning studies through Jung. And Love Doctor says, I've always been intrigued by the Frankenstein story. Yeah, but just got end of this. One thing I would mention about the Frankenstein story is that there is a Jungian analyst who has specialized in the Frankenstein story. And I don't remember his name just offhand, but maybe I can find it quickly. Let me just see if I can get it. Let's see. If you want to find a lot of my writing and work, you can go to archetypeandaction.com. And I think if I put in Frankenstein, I might get the name. Let's see. Oh, it's not there. No, it's sorry. Anyway, there is a Jungian analyst who does specializes in the Frankenstein story, and so you can find that by going through looking. You could go onto the Pacifica Graduate Institute website and do a search there, and he's written several books about it, so it's an interesting connection. Montana says, my life is much more beautiful and wholesome as I go on. Yeah, there's something to appreciate there, isn't there? Grace says that becoming flesh is the way Eros comes, and that's your job, right? And unfortunately, many of our theologians have failed to convey that. And so, once again, I'll be starting to read this book from tomorrow, The Bible and the Psyche by Edward Edinger. And I'm going to read it cover to cover in the next couple of weeks. Yeah, and Carl says, I don't these things inside, but sometimes the chaos is terrifying. Yes, it is. But I urge you to take a look at this book, Sacred Chaos by Francoise O'Kane. And it is out of print, but I did see this morning that there are 15 copies of it on used Amazon. And if you are a member of our advanced reading group, you can have access to a PDF copy of it. Montana says, yeah, Carl, when you climb the mountain, take rest in the valley stream and find them inside, precisely. That's how the journey feels. Some parts of it easy and some just great to bask in the light, or you get power from inside, but just being truly alive is intense. Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. Yeah. Montana says, Skip, when is your next stream? What do you have planned? Okay, I think I just answered that, but sometime tomorrow I'm going to be doing, starting this book called The Bible and the Psyche, Individuation, Symbolism in the Old Testament. And keep in mind that Dr. Jung described the way that we have to transform and develop, which he defined as individuation, but he's also called this the divine drama, and that the whole biblical story, both the Old Testament and the New Testament, are parts of that divine drama, Father and Son. And so they wouldn't still exist. I mean, the reason that certain events like Gethsemane or the crucifixion or what have you are in so many works of art is that they are archetypal for all of us. And, you know, other religions provided the same thing, but through other imagery. So, for example, Ganesha is a very meaningful image for Hindus, and it's symbolic. And so what you're doing when you're reading the Bible or going to the Hindu temple or going to the Muslim mosque is you're working on your development through this divine drama. And all the religions of the world do this for you in one way or another. And this is why I have been saying that the next stage of consciousness is not that, you know, the Bible and all this stuff isn't true. It's not true in the physical plane. It's true in the psyche. And that was the point Dr. Jung made in answer to Job, paragraph 752. It's actually in this book. What'd you say, Deb? You're late. Okay. All right. I have to go to my dinner, but when I say it's 752, it's actually paragraphs 552 to 758 of this book, which is Collected Works 11, Psychology and Religion, West and East. But it's been printed outside of this book as a freestanding book, Answer to Joe. But if you've read nothing, if you've never read this, you need this book, okay, if you want to understand Jung, Answer to Joe. In paragraph 752, Dr. Jung says very clearly every religious statement of whatever kind is a statement of the psyche. It's not a statement of the physical world. So when some Bible thumpers want to insist on the truth of the Bible, yes, the Bible is true. It's a true 100%. And so are all other religious texts. And they're true in the psyche of, typically, if you look at the major religions, each one has about a quarter of the world's population following it. And so now we need to say, okay, now that they're true, what can we learn from one another? Because we don't have wisdom automatically. Sorry, Gray, somehow that got moderated. Yeah, and Gray said Skip does what the psyche wants him to do, precisely. And so I don't have much of a plan, but I do have a plan because of my vision about the coronavirus, which I had a intimation in December when I first heard about the coronavirus that this one could kill me. And I take it very seriously for my own reasons. I wanted to make sure I have as much as I can onto the website, just in case. I'm not sure, but I had that instinct, so I want to be sure. So I want to give you all this book too, and let's hope none of us get coronavirus, or at least we get the vaccine before we get it. So anyway, I have to go. I've been summoned. and so one of the key things that Dr. Jung said is remember to live your life and remember to stay grounded. And so we have to live our life in the physical world too. And she just called me, so I have to go. And I'll see you again all soon. Thank you all. Thank you very much for the super chat, Ray. I appreciate that very much. And so peace. See you soon.